Okay, class, this is day 5 of the Civil Rights Unit. It should be Friday, even though this is going to post on YouTube the day before. It'll be released in Google Classroom on Friday. One last quick reminder, if you haven't done it yet and it's before your class would normally start, you could still do your makeup document of the week. It is due, though, by the start of your normal class period on Friday, so it's a little bit different for everybody. So hopefully you got those in, and on Monday you will look for a new document of the week. One last thing before we do the briefer notes today. I've had a lot of questions about some grading things, and they're very good questions. I have put on my Google Sites, which I also posted in your Google Classroom, frequently asked questions. And it basically goes through the difference between how I'm going to grade something like a document of the week, because it's going to come to me in a Google Doc. And basically, it explains how I'm going to give you feedback right in that Google Doc, and you'll get your grade right on it. And I'll write in a different, type in a different color, some feedback. But if you do a Google form like you did the other day for the civil rights review, I'm not doing anything through Google Classroom because essentially it is a little cumbersome to grade through that. If I have an answer and it say sit in, and you capitalize the S and sit in, or I do and you don't, it marks it wrong. So I graded all those answers manually, and then as I did it, I put it in progress book. Progress book is always what counts. I did not then go back and put it all into Google Classroom because it was pretty redundant. So there'll just be a difference there, and it's explained out in those frequently asked questions. And there's some others in there that you might need as well. So don't forget that today, after this lecture, there's also sort of our Fun Day Friday stuff. Now, I filmed that on my phone, which is why it's a different video. But basically, you're going to find in that your Dumb Laws, Dumb Crooks, and your Document of the Week passes, which I still did through virtual tickets. Throughout the last few weeks, people have volunteered to do different things, and I've given them tickets for it. And so we have 5 new winners, so they have passes they can use anytime. So let's finish up our brief notes today. Oh, also, there will probably be a link, I would think, to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. It's entirely optional. Some of you have heard it before, and that's fine. But if you haven't, it's well worth the listen. So today, we've already covered our court cases. We've already covered civil disobedience. A few of you missed that on the worksheet. You want to make sure that you know that a sit-in is an example of civil disobedience. It is not the definition of it. It's just an example. We talked a little bit yesterday about freedom riders. Today is the March on Washington. And then we're just going to touch a little bit on the JFK assassination and the magic bullet theory, but really that's going to be much more Monday. And Monday you'll even have less notes because on Monday we're going to try a reenactment. So let's pick up. Remember this section we did yesterday. You've done all about the 1960 presidential election. You've done about the Freedom Riders and how they were pushing the issue and essentially conducting mobile sit-ins throughout the South. And so you should have all of these notes. And of course, there's letters from a Birmingham jail where Dr. King describes civil disobedience. So your first new note today is the March on Washington. And we shouldn't have many in terms of notes today, but right here, the March on Washington. So finally, JFK took a side in the civil rights debate. So in June of 1963, so remember, he got elected, took office in January of 61, elected in 60. He'd been in office for quite a long time, and he just tried to ride the fence on civil rights, so he didn't offend Southerners or civil rights supporters. But through the encouragement of his brother, Bobby or Robert Kennedy, he finally took a strong stand and said, we need to be on the side of right, and the side of right is with Dr. King. And he proposed a civil rights bill. In support of that civil rights bill, Dr. King and many others, including who I always tell you is the most important civil rights leader too many people have never heard of, A. Philip Randolph, they organized this March on Washington. It's partially for job opportunities, partially for the Civil Rights Bill, and just partially for strong visibility for civil rights in general. And this March on Washington is a huge milestone moment where you have at least 200,000, sometimes you'll see the number 250,000, gather in front of the Lincoln Memorial to hear a series of speakers. Let me tell you, you do not want to follow this speaker, of course, Dr. King. You don't want to follow him because he is going to deliver one of the most famous speeches in American history, the I Have a Dream speech. And I've been on these steps, which he's standing. If this makes sense, if you've been to DC, it'll make more sense. He's standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial here, looking out to the Washington Monument here. And that's about a 2 mile span between those two. And you have that reflecting pool that's sort of behind his right arm there. And it just looks like this sea of people between himself standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial uh, and the Washington Monument. So just the sea of people. And he has written this extraordinary speech, the I Have a Dream speech. Again, I'm going to link to that. I think a lot of you have heard that before. But what's amazing about it is if you've ever had to give a speech before, and it's hard for me to compare. I'm not going to compare any speech I've ever had to give to anything he had to do, but I've spoken in front of 1,000 people before, and for politics, and that's nerve wracking. And you have to walk this fine line of like practicing your speech, but also not sounding like a robot. So imagine standing in front of 200,000 people, plus it's televised. You want to make sure you know exactly what you're talking about, but you also want to make sure you, again, don't sound like a robot. He does this amazing job of creating this outline. He had the main theme of his speech, the I have a dream. And he fills in, he leaves spaces for himself to sort of ad lib, although I'm sure he had some idea of what he wanted to say. So it just comes out with just this raw emotion, just deliberate and beautiful cadence. I mean, he has a way of speaking that is just powerful. And I don't know how else to describe it. Play that speech, and you will be reminded if you hadn't heard it, if you haven't heard it in a while, how powerful that was. This is a playbill from the March on Washington, or basically like an advertisement that was circulated beforehand. I just want to point out, if you look here, A. Philip Randolph. If you scroll down in this particular document, it'll tell you Speaker Dr. King. There are actually several organizer, A. Philip Randolph. Um, he's always behind the scenes in these things. There's a lot of people who are behind the scenes, but A. Philip Randolph is just very impressive to me. So we have this big movement, and you have this moment where it just feels like, talking to my grandparents about it, and both living in Ohio at the time, they were both for civil rights, but I'll just be honest with you, they just thought it was a quote unquote Southern problem. This felt like the moment they described to me that many Americans were like, oh, I get it. This is everybody's problem. And it seemed to be when Dr. King won over sort of middle America or average America. And a lot of people were like, yeah, what? How? Of course we're with Dr. King. This makes sense. And again, didn't win everybody over. There were still some hardcore segregationists, but there were a lot of Americans who maybe just thought this wasn't their issue, and this speech convinced them that, of course, it was America's issue. Now, this is August of 1963. So in June of 1963, JFK says, I'm for civil rights. In August, so same summer, 1963, Dr. King delivers this speech that is just going to live through the ages. And then just a couple months later, JFK is assassinated. Now, why? We'll get into that on another day. There's a million reasons. It could be related to civil rights. I don't think that's really the leading theory of most people because, frankly, he had so many enemies, it's hard to tell exactly who. There are people who think the CIA did it, the mob did it, Cuban exiles did it, communists did it. There's a book out a few years ago that Lyndon Johnson did it. I don't know. We're going to get into that more Monday, Tuesday. But what I know is, just as a president came out in favor of civil rights, he is assassinated. That assassination takes place November 22nd, 1963. John F. Kennedy was in an open car waving at a large gathering of people who were there to see the president in Dallas, Texas. And Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested within an hour or two after the shooting. So again, we're going to dive into a lot of this. Not that, honestly, that this assassination is going to be big on a lot of tests. I just think it's one of the most fascinating things that happened in American history. And I think you'll be interested in it. So we'll do a recreation. I'll show you PowerPoint, and we'll go through some of the theories, and I'll tell you what I think. but nobody knows. Nobody knows. Um, to add to the conspiracy, Lee Harvey Oswald, who shot John F. Kennedy, and again, we'll go through the conspiracy theories, but I mean, almost everybody believes Lee Harvey Oswald is at the very least one of the shooters. Before he could fully be interrogated, he is shot while being transferred from the Dallas police to some federal authority. And they were filming this, and another guy, Jack Ruby, shot him. It's all on TV, so there's footage of it. So that really makes people think it's a conspiracy because the guy who can truly answer, "Hey, were you working alone with somebody else?" That guy dies. And if you're a conspiracy theorist, you go, "Boy, you want to know how to tie up loose ends of a conspiracy? Kill a conspirator." Uh, so they formed this commission to figure out what happened. What happened to JFK? Who killed him? What was it? You're going to hear all these different theories. Was it one shooter or was it two? Was there somebody standing behind the grassy knoll, or was there somebody, this place or that place? And so they had this commission, very important people, including Chief Justice Earl Warren of the Supreme Court, the man who was presiding over Brown versus Board when it was decided. Uh, Future President Gerald Ford, just a lot of important people in government met and started to investigate. Hey, was it really just Lee Harvey Oswald alone, or was there a conspiracy? What was going on here? And they concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter. Now, for them to conclude this, you had to then accept what has been sarcastically called the magic bullet theory. And that, again, is going to make a lot more sense on Monday. But if you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and we know that he fired 3 shots, then I'm going to show you on Monday what these 3 shots had to have done. And one of them is going to have to make some weird turns in the air, and then make another turn in the air, and then kind of appear out of nowhere. And we'll get into that again a little bit later. But regardless of what you think, you can set all that aside. Our nation was devastated. This was a young president with a young family, little kids, a beautiful wife, and people just they the people that liked JFK really liked JFK. And to see, in terms of a president, a young man gunned down, he's in his mid 40s. This was a jarring incident to the nation. I think anytime, you have a world leader who's killed, it's jarring, but especially one who is so young. So we will reconstruct some of this a little bit later, again on Monday. But again, I wish we were in the classroom. One of the things I didn't grab before we sort of bugged out for the coronavirus was I have a lot of newspapers from that day, and it gives you an idea when full pages, several full pages, and things like the Cleveland Plain Dealer are dedicated to it. But this is Lee Harvey Oswald, and he is arrested as the lone assassin. That gives you a little bit idea of the magic bullet theory. And then this is a still shot of the footage of Jack Ruby. This man here is a Texas. I can't remember if he's a ranger or a police officer, but either way, he is handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald, walking him to a federal car of some sort. And again, Jack Ruby just walks right up and kills Lee Harvey Oswald, sort of closing up that end of the conspiracy. So we will get into this conspiracy theory and the magic bullet theory and all of that sort of, I want to call it fun. A man died, but an interesting part of American history. So that's all we had for notes today. That finishes up that section. Make sure you click on again the Dr. King I Have a Dream speech, and of course the fun Dumb Laws, Dumb Crooks, and Document of the Week passes. Okay, everybody stay safe out there and have a good weekend.